Hello, YouTube. Luigi here. I'm going for episode 12 today. That'll be two in one day in the ongoing series called Tales of a Country Architect. This episode is going to be called Mindfulness versus Mindlessness. It's not an original title. It came from a book by a psychologist where she advances this theory that there are mindless people and mindful people. And the mindless people live by strict adherence to black and white rules. There is no shades of gray. There are no shades of gray. And therefore, there's no cause for individual discernment, individual judgment. You live in a either black or white world. Your decision making is easy. You're not tormented by moral dilemmas. You're not torn apart by strenuous thinking. It's a pretty lazy way out, but there might be some measure of peace to it. The mindful person, on the other hand, might have some black and white rules, but they're only guidelines, and they're not imprisoned by them. A mindful person will take the time to evaluate the variables unique to every situation before making a decision. And maybe the black and white rules apply, and maybe they don't, but they're not imprisoned by black and white rules. They're more left up to their own discernment, their own judgment, as they examine the variables unique to any given situation. Now, what does this have to do with the Tales of a Country Architect? Many, many years ago, very early on in my internship with Frank Kennett, there was another intern there named Patrick. Patrick was a decent designer, but Patrick had a mindless mindset. Patrick lived by black and white rules that could not be violated. There was no room for judgment, discernment, and just rolling with the punches as they arose. He was working with a brilliant landscape architect, a Chinaman named Johnny Lee. Johnny Lee was a little guy in stature. A lot of Chinamen are, but he had a bald head, and if he had only worn a gold ring, he would have looked like Mr. Clean. Okay, Johnny Lee. Johnny Lee and Patrick were wrapping up the site plan for a lake house in Madison. Because there was a former building there, the selectmen gave us the verbal okay that they were going to grandfather our footprint, and we could get at least that close again to the water with our new footprint. So we proceeded, the site plan wise, according to that representation from the selectmen. Well, the selectman had a change of heart, and he reneged, and he backpedaled, and so now we have to comply with the proper waterfront setback, and this involved Johnny Lee totally redoing his site plan. It was a different turning radius into the garage. It involved different topography, different efforts to get the site to drain and still save trees, etc., etc. Well, Johnny Lee, I think that's a cool name for a Chinaman. Johnny Lee noticed that if he could, and he sought Patrick's permission on this, out of respect for his role as the designer. Johnny Lee noticed that if he could eliminate the one riser down, the step down at the front door at the threshold, into this well-protected portico plaza, little mini plaza, that would facilitate the site drainage so much and save half a dozen trees if we could just get rid of that step. So Johnny Lee asked Patrick, "Hey, what about we eliminate this step here?" Now remember, Patrick is a black and white kind of person, and Patrick says, "But we always step down one riser at the front door." Now Johnny Lee, who's a free thinker, he's not imprisoned by these ridiculous black and white rules. He says, "Yes, but in this case, your entrance is at a re-entrant angle, protected by the northwest wind. Snow's not going to pile up in front of your threshold. We should be just fine. It would save the site so much in terms of drainage and more trees coming down. And Patrick says, but we always step down one riser at the front door. And Johnny Lee says, I understand, but hear me out, friend. You know, we got this huge canopy roof and this big, paved brick slab in front of it, giving us further protection at this front door. And because of these other variables here, if we can only take them into consideration, I'm saying you're going to be just fine without stepping down a riser at your front door. And Patrick says, but we always step down one riser at the front door. And Johnny Lee doesn't think this way. Johnny Lee thinks on his feet, and he uses his judgment and discernment, and that's why he came up with this idea in the first place. It presented itself as, oh, here's a more intelligent way to do this. Well, they're going back and forth, and Patrick just will not give. And I'm watching this brilliant landscape architect, Johnny Lee, cave in to this irrational designer because we always step down one riser at the front door. And it was a shame. It was a shame. Johnny Lee knew which battle he could take on and which battle he couldn't. This is one he chose not to further engage because he realized right away he was dealing with an irrational mind, a mind incapable of discernment and flexible thinking, taking into account the variables unique to the situation that made it okay, in this case, to violate a black and white rule. I didn't have a dog in this fight. It wasn't. I wasn't the designer. I knew Johnny Lee. I liked him a lot. And that's how it went down. That's how it went down, where the mindless triumphed over the mindful. Wow. All right, everybody. Interesting little anecdote here. I thought you might enjoy it. Take care. Bye-bye.